This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Mark Carney delivers what some are calling the most consequential speech by a Canadian Prime Minister in decades at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, and the world is listening. Not one mention of Donald Trump, but the speech obviously all about Donald Trump, or at least Canada's place in a new world order. That's how Carney said it a few days ago. And of course, it triggered a bunch of Canadians that have felt that there's some sort of global conspiracy, that the World Economic Forum is where it all unfolds. But reasonable folks looking at this are acknowledging that new partnerships, including trade and security, are imperative in a world that is dramatically different than it was just a number of years ago. In an unusual development on the heels of that speech, a wonderful friend of this show, Senator Charles Adler, reached out to us and demanded that we prepare a place for him at the next available opportunity. He says his Canadian heart is bursting at the seams. And of course, we're happy to welcome Charles Adler back. That coming up on the back nine of this episode. We'll also be taking a look at what you have to say in the live chat powered by Park Power. And of course, you can always send us an email to talk@ryanjespersen.com. We're going to lead this show off, however, with an in-studio conversation with the individual that is being described by some, I wonder what he'll say about it, as the front runner in the federal NDP's leadership race. You know, those party members will be going to a vote at the end of March to determine who will take the party forward. Of course, most notably into the next election, with some serious hurdles to overcome, but the optimists will see the opportunities. We'll find out where Avi Lewis lands on it all in just a moment. This episode is happening with the presenting sponsorship of our friends at Hansen Distillery. You can find them online at hansendistillery.com. This is Edmonton's original distillery, rooted in prairie grit and a rebellious spirit. Hansen's known for authentic small batch whiskey, vodka, gin, moonshine, and of course those unique liqueurs we were telling you about through the holidays, crafted right here in Alberta's capital with local Alberta ingredients. Every bottle tells a true story of passion, heritage, and hands-on craftsmanship. So we invite you to raise a glass to real talk and real spirits. If you happen to be in our neck of the woods, you can visit Hansen's beautiful location on 174th Street, 111th Avenue, just north of Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West, or you can look for their latest creations wherever you purchase fine spirits. And you can always read more about Hansen's remarkable startup story by visiting their website, hansendistillery.com. They're proudly local. They're always original, made right here. It's Hansen Distillery. As we welcome to our studio in the historic Mercer Warehouse in downtown Edmonton, a longtime journalist and storyteller. He's an activist, and he is now the candidate for leader of the federal NDP, Avi Lewis. It's nice to have you here in Edmonton. Thanks for making time for us.
It's been a while, Ryan. Yeah, no, it's great to be back.
You and I were recounting the last time that we spoke, and we've determined that it was on terrestrial radio, which means this is your Real Talk debut.
Yes, I'm now that you've flown free of the old school. It's a sweet deal you got here. It's beautiful.
Thanks very much. Good to have you here. You've been in Alberta's capital city for a short period of time. You met with NDP, I would imagine, for the most part, members and maybe some potential supporters as you try to deliver a message across the country that you're the man for the job to resurrect the NDP. Is this leadership ambition been a long time percolating?
You keep saying it to see if this look of stark terror will enter my eyes as I realize what it is that we've embarked on.
We have the camera coming in at a slow How do you feel? Does it make you nervous, or does it get you excited when people describe you maybe as a front runner?
Well, the front runner thing, I don't know. You don't. That's not a label anybody wants. We're nose to the grindstone, just really working. We got a week left until the membership deadline, so people got to buy a membership if they want to have a say in this race by January 28th. But it's been, Ryan, honestly, it's been thrilling to see the momentum build. We had like more than 250 people last night in the Arts Barns here in Edmonton. And just seeing people, we're not on the radar in the mainstream a lot. The party doesn't have status. We're at the bottom of the electoral cycle. And, people are talking about Carney and Davos. We're not in the center of the Canadian conversation, but at our base, at the grassroots, and in the Canadian public, there is a hunger for another option. And I think we got slaughtered in the last election as people voted out of fear of Trump and the NDP vote collapsed. But the hunger for an actual alternative to the two old parties has never been stronger. And we're seeing it in surging of fundraising numbers, like it's really happening at the base.
You're off to Calgary after this. I want to ask you about your message to the prairie provinces, and we'll get into some of the specifics. I was going to characterize the NDP's most recent election performance a little bit more graciously. But disappointing, room for improvement. But you went ahead and said slaughtered, and
we got our asses handed to us.
You got your asses handed to you.
Well, listen, people crave straight talk right now, and authenticity is needed in politics. And weasel words are not working. And people want to know where the NDP stands on the big issues. And we got to be putting forward actual solutions that would address we've been laser focused on the cost of living crisis on our campaign from day one. Like, it is the everyday emergency of just trying to get by in an economy that is impossible. And people feel it's rigged because it is. And people are working harder and harder and harder. Wages never keep up with the skyrocketing prices of everything. And that is the crisis that people are dealing with in Canada. And yes, there are global things happening, and we talk about all that. And yes, there are big changes happening in the country, but that's not the everyday grind. And so just focusing on that and solutions to that would actually make a difference, that we can communicate clearly, that people get. They don't have to agree with them all, but people know where we stand. I think that's what's working. That's what's needed today.
It was fascinating to watch polling through the most recent federal election, through those campaigns, and recognize, as you identified, the obvious factor that influenced Canadians the most, and that was the relationship with the United States, the relationship with Donald Trump. I think it's safe to say that Mark Carney established himself over Pierre Poilievre as the best candidate to negotiate with Donald Trump and, of course, with that administration. But quite interesting for me to see many of the top election issues, so to speak, just drop further and further down the list. And affordability, while it is a daily concern today when we're talking, and tomorrow and the next day, for a lot of Canadian families, it wasn't issue number one. I would imagine, much to your chagrin, issues like the environment and climate change were even further down that list. Why do you think, in your assessment of what happened, why didn't Canadian voters trust the NDP to have seats at that table in dealing with the Americans?
Well, it was a. I've heard it described as like a black swan election. It was a unique one. I've been following politics for a really long time as a journalist like you in my first career, and now with more skin in the game, you could say. But I don't think we've ever seen an election like it, and people voted out of fear. And the Conservative movement is very strong in Canada, and Poilievre has a base. He keeps it well fed on red meat. But the progressive vote went all in one place. And that's why, Carney's speech in Davos was a really interesting moment. It was a really smart speech. He quoted Thucydides and the whole Václav Havel frame. And then he referred to Trump as the hegemon. Mm-hmm. I think there's a way in which the loftiness kind of hit people. We haven't had a kind of grand spirit or loftiness in our politics in quite a long time. So I think that was a smart move. Felt like a new speechwriter.
Apparently he wrote every word himself. He insisted on it. They say.
Okay, great.
They say.
Terrific. But what the real relevance is that he named the moment, which is that the rules are gone. They're shredded. The United States is stomping around the world in exercises of naked power. And it's reconfiguring what countries like Canada need to do. And I think all of that really did hit the mark. The question is whether what he does is actually going to be informed by that, or whether, because he's also, at the same time as he's saying these things, considering participating in Trump's Board of Peace, initiative, which
with
is what,
Putin.
with Putin, with Netanyahu already at the table, pay $1 billion for what? It's like a traveling Berlin conference where they're going to divide up the resources of the world where there are conflicts. Like, what would Trump do with a body like that? Why is Carney even floating that? Or the Golden Dome, which sounds dirty because it's weird and a dumb idea, never going to happen, It's like, so he's, I don't know. I think there's a bit of daylight between Carney, the statesman analyst that we saw at Davos, and the way he's kind of elbows down a lot of the negotiations with Trump, throwing out the digital services tax for nothing at all, right? The big challenge of our time is these tech billionaires are ruling our lives inside and outside of our devices and the world around us. AI is reshaping our world. Carney's all in. Evan Solomon, kind of minister of AI, sales and marketing, they're all in on this. They're firing 40,000 civil servants. And what? People on social assistance are going to deal with a chatbot? I mean, I think this is a disaster. And we can't strengthen Canada and strengthen Canada's independence and our economy in austerity when the government is like also tripling, quadrupling, quintupling down on defense spending. So there's all these contradictions in this moment, and Canadians who voted against Trump for protection from Trump must be pretty confused because there's a bunch of carnies out there pointing for me and what we're seeing at the grassroots, like I was saying, the need for a clear alternative vision of what Canada could be in this moment.
You could argue that there's all kinds of justification for ramping up defense spending in a big way. Number one, expectations to meet the NATO commitments, but also threats to Canada's Arctic sovereignty and that sort of a thing.
But all of that was but he more than doubled the NATO commitment. He's talking about 5% of our GDP. That's a transformation of our society. And if you look at the military leadership and our deep integration with the U.S. military establishment, a few weeks ago, Canada spent $3.6 billion on munitions, bombs, and bullets, buying them from the United States in 1 week. So we're gonna go to 5% of our GDP to protect us from this threat by giving huge amounts of public money to American defense companies because they're the biggest ones on earth. They're right next door, and we're totally integrated. And he's made no moves to de-link from the American military establishment and the high commands that are fully integrated. So it doesn't all make sense.
Okay, so at risk of asking a question that could have a half-hour answer,
okay, I'll talk.
As a potential leader of a party, a top 3 party in Canada, that I would imagine you have a goal to restore that party to its former glory and beyond, to official opposition status and beyond. You want to be Canada's next prime minister. Let me invoke that phrase that triggers some and inspires others. How do you see Canada's place, or what do you see Canada's role looking like in this new world order?
Well, we need to restore independence economically and in our foreign policy as well. And I think for me and for a lot of Canadians, the genocide in Gaza has been utterly devastating. And the Liberal government saying that we have an arms embargo when actually we find out there's a huge loophole and we're still providing arms through the United States to a country that is still committing genocide, that's not an independent foreign policy. And when it comes to our domestic policy, we were fighting in the NDP side, we were fighting free trade deals in the 80s and 90s because we said at the time it made no sense to integrate with an economy 10 times our size that also happens to be a global empire and tends to do whatever it wants. And now, 30, 40 years later, that's the situation that we find ourselves in when suddenly the hegemon, as our prime minister says, is unleashed and just rampaging around doing random stuff. So we need to return economic independence. That means making stuff in Canada again. That means addressing the cost of living emergency with the government actually stepping in where there's 90% of Canadians, 92% of Canadians believe that monopolies are driving up the price of groceries. Because we know we got 5 big grocery stores. We got 6 big banks that made $70 billion last year. We got 3 telephone companies that dominate, cell phones, broadband, and all that stuff, charging the highest prices and the crappiest customer service anywhere, right? Rogers, TELUS, and Bell. And everybody knows that the cost of living crisis is directly related to the 3 corporations in a trench coat dominating every sector of the economy. So we actually need a government, and this is my vision for Canada, that will step up and provide the basic goods and services that Canadians need at a price that people can afford on the salaries they're making. And that would mean returning manufacturing to Canada. That would mean creating unionized jobs, using Canadian materials like steel for, let's say, a 21st century electrical grid. So we could roll out renewables across the country and trade electricity, clean electricity east-west among provinces. Or an electric bus revolution. I was at the New Flyer bus plant in Winnipeg a few weeks ago, and they've got $13.5 billion of back orders for electric buses, and they're using Canadian steel in a unionized shop to do the parts and the assembly, and there's a huge need for this. Remember when Greyhound abandoned the prairies a few years ago? So we actually need And some of these things got to be done under public ownership.
You're in a city right now, by the way, where the electric bus experiment has been a total disaster.
Well, yeah, and they're blaming it on the buses when it was like a terrible, terrible, terrible deal to go with a company like that. This is why if we did it under Canadian public ownership, Canadian government and crown corporations are not going anywhere. We actually need a government that's ready to govern in the public interest and step in when the market fails. And the liberal approach has been to give billions of our dollars to corporations and hope that they'll solve things like the housing crisis, like Carney's big housing plan. We're going to have a build out like we haven't seen since the Second World War. It turns out that he was just wanted to catalyze the private sector to do it for us. And now housing prices have started to level off. Housing starts have stalled. Construction workers are being laid off. We need a public developer hiring public construction companies to do this build out of housing that we need, because the market is never going to oversupply so that prices come down. Like, he's supposed to be a banker who understands how capitalism works. We actually need the government to govern.
We're talking to Avi Lewis, NDP leadership candidate, in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. You can check out his campaign ideas. I like that, ideas. You don't have platform, you have ideas. That's at lewisforleader.ca. You've used the word public about 10 times in the last 5 minutes.
Sorry, were you going to warn me that Mercedes-Benz is the sponsor for our segment?
Johnny, what were we talking about the other day when Mercedes-Benz was our sponsor? Public transportation. It was a public transit.
You're on a mission to sink me with my base, Ryan.
I am. Yeah, just well, I can pick our 5 top shelf sponsors to read during the interview if you'd like.
Great.
Your platform does rely heavily on public options, public groceries, public banking, public telecom. You just talked about public developers. Why is expanding the state the right answer at a time when a lot of Canadians distrust government delivery?
Yeah, I think this is a true thing. And I don't trust the government to do things, because we have seen over decades of austerity, the government outsource everything to consultants, and KPMG runs so much of what should be public. And we do need to rebuild the civil services ability to actually do big things for Canadians, because this system of just giving our money to corporations that are already making tons of profits and hoping that they'll solve our problems hasn't solved our energy problem, hasn't solved our housing problem. And in a province like Alberta, where you have maybe the worst premier in Canadian history, privatizing healthcare baldly, Bill 11, invoking the notwithstanding clause against trans kids and teachers and the right to strike and stuff like that. We actually need the federal government to step up and restore Canadians' faith in that institution by re-onboarding the capacity to do things like build housing. It's totally possible. We did it as recently as the 90s, but it takes an all-of-government commitment.
Do you really think Danielle Smith's the worst premier in Canadian history?
I'm struggling to think of someone. Well, could you have any other candidates?
I'm an objective interviewer in this context. In this context. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the attacks on vulnerable people in this province, the fueling the separatist movement, irresponsibly while claiming not to. Everyone sees through all that stuff, and I just think it's been. It's been a really hard time for a lot of people in Alberta under this government.
I want to use our time wisely, and this was not on my list, but I am curious to pick your brain on what you would do, hypothetically, as Prime Minister, or just as a prominent political leader in the country with 2 percolating separatist movements in Alberta and Quebec. Now, if you talk to folks on the street, and polling will support this, the majority of Albertans and the majority of Quebecers do not want a referendum on independence, but it is an issue.
Yeah.
How would you manage it?
Well, first of all, do everything we can to get Naheed Nenshi, the next premier of Alberta. He's definitely got his eye on that threat. And also, I think surfacing for people that the Alberta separatist movement is, I think, better seen as a kind of a U.S. integration movement. I mean, with Quebec, there is the sense that Quebec might have an economy that could stand on its own. But I think that the Alberta separatist movement is very woven in with the MAGA movement and with U.S. integration. I don't think Canadians are in the mood for that at all. And I think reframing that threat for Albertans is key.
I want to jump into our live chat powered by Park Power. Real talkers have a lot to say about this. Most engaged talk audience in Canada. I know you already know that. We've got some NDP supporters in there, and we've got some loud critics in there as well, as we're talking to Avi Lewis. He wants to be the next leader of Canada's NDP. You can leave a comment in our live chat if you're watching us live. You can always leave a comment on our YouTube episode if you're watching this later as well. This conversation is happening with the support of Canada's Open University. That's Athabasca University at athabascau.ca. Wrap your mind around around this. More than 500,000 alumni at AU, Canada's open university with world-class accredited online degrees and courses, hundreds of them, designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. You may have had your eyes on a post-secondary adventure, an undergrad, maybe an MBA or something else, but barriers stand in your way. Cost, availability, time, where you live. Well, those objections, well, they just don't exist. That's the AU advantage. With Athabasca University, you can select your path today. Learn more about financial supports, admissions process, student supports, and everything else online at athabascau.ca. We're so proud to be supporting UCAN Youth Services as our 2026 charity of choice. This nonprofit charitable organization in the Metro Edmonton region is helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. Check out their programs at ucan.ca. Creating confidence through opening doors. These young people, now motivated, now focused, are making a great contribution to workforces all across the province. And UCAN does it in part due to the fundraising of their comedy nights. We're going to be there in March, and I invite you to get a table and bring your friends too. A hilarious evening, all in support of UCAN. From March 9th to 11th and the 16th to 18th of March, you can catch UCAN comedy nights. You can get your tickets today by following the link at ucan.ca. And our friends at California Closets want to remind you your suit jackets don't have to lay on the floor, friends. You don't have to be searching for your drill or your extension cords or trying to find a place to put those Christmas decorations. They are the masters of custom closets and storage solutions for the entire home. And I know what some of you are thinking. I could never afford California Closets. Well, check out their website, californiaclosets.ca. They can work with any space. They can work with any budget. And everything that they install, manufactured right here in Alberta, is guaranteed for life. It all starts with a conversation with the California Closets team of designers. You can request that free consultation today by visiting californiaclosets.ca. We're talking to Avi Lewis. He wants to be the next leader of Canada's NDP. Elder Taz is watching us on Facebook streaming this morning. She says that's kind of discounting the intelligence of voters when you say they voted out of fear. For many, it was a strategic vote based on the information available. Emily G says, Jagmeet Singh just kind of came across as angry to me, she says, and not offering any real alternatives. He got buried by somebody much more balanced than him. Tracy says the NDP has a real opportunity here to reestablish itself as the Labour Party or the People's Party.
Yeah.
Anytime that there's a leadership race, there's an opportunity almost for an ideological reset or to plot a new course for the party. For a lot of people, they may see that as a lack of electoral strategy, more of an ideological exercise. But what do you think?
Well, People's Party is taken as a name.
Right. But and I'm not sure you want to align yourself with that.
No. That's kind of the horseshoe thing, which is not my bag at all. No, I mean, we've been talking about the NDP returning to its roots. On Thursday night, I'll be in Calgary at Legion Number 1, which is the room where the CCF, the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, was formed in 1932. And my grandpa David Lewis was the general secretary of the CCF from 1936 until the mid-50s. And he was leader in the early 70s. And that's when the left party in Canada was a party of the 99%. My grandpa wrote a book in 1943 where they talked about the 99% and the 1%, which is, like decades and decades and decades ago, they identified that the very top slice of society is just hogging all the gains and hoarding all the wealth. And we really need a party that's going to say, guys, Galen Weston is worth $18 billion and he gets 15% raises every year in his executive compensation. And your grocery prices are out of freaking control. We need a public option for groceries to actually break the grocery cartel and make groceries more affordable. And we have a detailed plan for a public option for groceries that have 50 warehouse plus local, government-owned, unionized labor, grocery stores across this country with regional food hubs tied into federal procurement for the volume discounts on wholesale purchasing. And give me that Soviet Union look. I'm not talking about nationalizing all the grocery chains.
You're in a part of the country where people greatly value private opportunities, capitalist opportunities.
And you have the only public bank left in Canada, the ATA.
ATB?
The ATB, excuse me. There are public institutions across Canada. SaskTel is still a public phone company.
Government's reportedly looking at selling ATB, by the way.
Not a good idea. idea. They should redirect it towards actually using these public assets for the public good, for the 99%.
Where do you draw the line, though, on government, you'll say involvement, I'll say interference,
Sure.
government interference in industry?
When we have cartels, when we have these big corporations that are price fixing and colluding, come on, in the grocery business, they fix the price of bread, Ryan, for 20 years. I mean, this is like the basic necessities of life. It's not optional to eat, right? And the government has to step in when the market is turned into a monopoly. And Canadians understand this, okay? So however you feel about like government, interference in the economy, even a government talking about a public option for groceries is going to remind these dudes that they can make money, a reasonable amount of profit, without gouging people day after day. And that's what we need in Canada. Now, we could get the price of groceries down at these public stores by 30 to 40%. And it would cost us, are you ready for this? Because we've kind of costed it out. It would cost us $300 million a year, Brian. 0.5% of our current defense budget. We could have a public option for groceries where people pay 30 to 40% less for food. To me, that seems like a really straightforward proposal. You can agree with it or disagree with it, but if I lead the NDP, you're going to get straight talk, you're going to get some moral clarity, and you're going to get some solutions that we think are as big as the crises we face, and we can debate them, but we can be serious about them, and we're going to build support on that basis.
I want to talk to you about climate. It's been a big part of your advocacy over decades. You're calling for a Canadian, a Green New Deal scale investment. So how do you sell that? What are you going to say to folks in Calgary over the next couple of days? How do you sell that in resource-dependent regions like Alberta without losing them entirely?
Well, we want to reduce your electricity bill right away. Like, heat pumps are amazing. They cost so much less than gas heating in your home, and you get the bonus of air conditioning in the summer, which you need. And in smoke season, which we used to call summer, heat pumps, I don't know if you have one. You have one?
No.
They're amazing.
We did a whole show on heat pumps.
They're
people
fantastic. I was just
divided on heat pumps.
Oh man, I was talking to a plumber last night at the event that we had, and he was like, "Thank you for talking about heat pumps. They're so good. Everybody I've ever installed one for loves it. You get air conditioning, and in smoke season, which is climate-driven wildfires, right? It takes the heat out of your house. It doesn't bring the outside air in. So when we have smoke days in BC, we turn up the heat pump air conditioning, we close all the windows, we're cool as cukes, our electricity bill's going down. What is the problem, right? Even in sub-zero temperatures, if you just have an energy efficient house, these heat pumps can give you heating and cooling for a lot less money. We need a national heat pump industry, and there should be one of these in every single Canadian home. It's massive amounts of work that we can generate as part of a Green New Deal and part of a generational, let's shift our energy system, which we got to do. Albertans know, that the oil industry is shaky again. Are we going to get off this roller coaster ever?
Well, we've talked a lot on this show about a pretty remarkable moment with Mark Carney and Danielle Smith sitting down and signing a memorandum of understanding to build a new pipeline, much to the chagrin of BC's NDP Premier, David Eby. Coastal First Nations say like hell it's going to happen, but
well, it's
still...
not going to, Ryan, it's not going to happen because there's no business case for it, and that's why there's no private proponent. And the fact is that the oil industry is on the verge of crisis again, because the Venezuela just came online and it's the same heavy oil and there's only so much refining capacity. It's all on the Gulf Coast except for one refinery in China. So there's a lot of magical thinking going on that we're going to ramp up production even further. Forget the climate element. I'm concerned about fossil fuel workers, right? And this is the biggest problem, right? They like to cast environmentalists as the enemies and we don't care about fossil fuel workers. You know who's been hardest on oil workers in the last decade? The industry itself, which figured out how to make a barrel of oil with half as many workers in the last 10 years, thrown 40,000 workers under the bus while they increased production by a third. So if people don't want to go through the bust cycle again, it's time to diversify. It was time to diversify a long time ago, and a lot of Albertans know this.
A lot of engagement in our chat. Alberta Girl says electric trolley buses were awesome in Edmonton, but some brain trust thought it was better to go all diesel and ironically then bought a bunch of lemon EV buses.
Yeah.
A lot of folks are taking big shots at specific grocery stores here. I'm not looking to necessarily pick a fight with Safeway, but everybody's
the anger is real.
Well, and of course, I think because for a lot of people, they're making very real choices on what their families can afford, and they're having to make tough choices. For a lot of other folks, they're just spending way more on groceries than they have in past.
I was on Bay Street last week in Toronto, And just talking to people who work in the financial industry about the fact that they made $27.3 billion in performance-based pay in the big six banks. Just the stock analysts and the investment bankers, they got a 15% raise. How much did you get? Let's ask your listeners, what was their raise last year, right? And like the big banks make $70 billion in 1 year. We got to be taxing that stuff. There needs to be excess profit taxes. This country's awash in wealth, and people can't afford food and rent. What is government for, Ryan? But to balance the scales and actually take care of people when the market is making out like the 1% are making out like bandits, and the rest of us are down here on planet Earth actually trying to feed our kids.
What's one of the issues that's very important to you as a leadership candidate, and that would be very important to you as leader, that is not in the spotlight right now, that's not a significant part of the public discussion? What do you wish Canadians were paying closer attention to?
I mean, I really do think that we are paying attention to the things that matter the most, and it's all just a bit overwhelming. Like you wake up in the morning and you kind of have second thoughts about opening your phone to see what fresh horrors await. And in this awful time, what's actually been really beautiful about this leadership campaign is seeing people come together behind these big swing ideas that we're putting out there and actually find each other again and find a sense of community that it might be worth throwing down and fighting for something together. This is the roots of the NDP, as a party of the people. And so I think that basic element of community and connecting with each other and getting out of the digital slop factory of our phones and actually like being together and doing stuff together. For me, it's politics, what I'm passionate about, social change. And for a lot of people who are showing up for our campaign, but just detaching and finding each other feels really urgent right now. And I don't know. How do you talk about that without sounding like a BC hippie here in Alberta?
Yeah. I mean, not
it's
that there's anything wrong
right?
with BC hippies. It's a fascinating dynamic, isn't it? We don't have time to get into it, but the BC-Alberta relationship is really fascinating.
Oh, it's sibling. It's awesome.
There's a lot of shared values.
Nobody hurts you like your family.
Yeah, no, I agree. In our live chat, powered by Park Power, Christine says catastrophic changes that have come as a result of Donald Trump have changed so much across the board. And in light of that and our immediate concerns, she says, I think, sadly, the NDP has become far less relevant, but I really do like Avi. That from Christine. What's your message to those, in closing, that the party may have lost, or those that may be undecided, the politically homeless, so to speak? What's your message to them?
Do you want to have a two-party system in Canada? Because we've seen what happens when there's two interchangeable corporate parties that the business community kind of loves either one. They, the 1% always get what they need from the government. Or do we want to have like a thriving debate in Canada where there's an actual other alternative? And I think that the NDP, there's a structural need for the NDP. And as I was knocking on doors in Vancouver Centre in the last election, even as it dawned on me that we were getting clobbered, talking to people, do you want the NDP to disappear so we have a two-party system? And whatever their political preferences, people are like, this is good for democracy to have another option. Carney's gone pretty far to the right? All these Conservative MPs crossing the floor are because he's changed the Liberal brand dramatically, and there's very little daylight in actual hard policies between him and the Conservatives, which is why the Conservatives are supporting many of the major pieces of legislation, all the fast-track legislation and stuff like that. So if Canadians actually want to have a good democratic debate, I'm up for it.
I mean, ironically, the Conservatives need you to do better.
That sucks. And that's why our first past the post system is toxic for our democracy. When you live in a country... Do we have to flee the building now?
I don't know what's going on. That was
good sound effects.
Yeah. This is what you get in the downtown core.
Yeah, seriously. When you live in a country where a party can get 36, 37% of the popular vote and have a majority, almost absolute power, we do not live in a democracy. So if people vote defensively and people vote strategically. We have a phrase that I held my nose and voted for X. It's alienating us from the very basic act of democracy, from voting itself. We need a form of proportional representation desperately in Canada. And if the NDP holds a balance of power again with the Libs, I think we should go in with one demand: change the electoral system so that the people can actually vote for a party they believe in, and that the percentage of support is represented in the House of Commons.
Of course, the Liberals promised that 11 years ago. Canadians never got it. Would that be a significant part of your work?
Massive. I'm passionate about it, and so are most Canadians. And so many people, I think that was one of the big things that brought down Justin Trudeau, that so many people were so betrayed by that whole thing. This will be the last first past the post election in Canadian history. And then when he didn't get the system that would benefit him, he bailed on the whole thing. And this is, again, what makes people cynical about government and cynical about democracy. So I think electoral reform can restore our faith in the democratic process and give people a reason to vote for something instead of always voting against.
That's Avi Lewis, who's been joining us in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. You can check out his platform, his ideas, his endorsements, and more at lewisforleader.ca. Again, this NDP leadership vote will go down in Winnipeg on the 27th to the 29th of March. But per your website, folks, at the time we're talking, have 7 days, 15 hours, 53 minutes, and 45 seconds and counting to get their membership.
It's $10 to buy a membership and have a say in this race.
Have you had any insights into what membership sales have looked like? Is that information being made public to candidates?
Well, we won't know. No. Every campaign is tracking their own, and we're really
But your
happy.
campaign is selling memberships.
Hell yeah.
Do you have an idea or a general estimate on how many you've sold?
I mean, we're not talking numbers, but we're excited and happy about how many memberships we're selling.
Of course you're going to say that.
Well, I mean, we've also we're going to cross $900,000 shortly.
Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we've already shattered Jagmeet Singh's record for a leadership contest in the fourth quarter of last year. $350,000 was the most any leadership candidate had ever raised in a quarter. We raised more than $7 million. So there's obviously a hunger. There's small donations. They're coming from. We've had like almost 6,000 donations from across the country, and from 500 different communities. So we have support for these big swing ideas from across the country. And they're small donations. We're doing it Bernie Sanders style, with like a big base of support and not just a handful of fancy people who can make big donations.
We appreciate your availability while you're here in town, in Alberta's capital city. We wish you well the rest of the way. Again, folks can check out lewisforleader.ca. We've been speaking with Avi Lewis, federal NDP leadership candidate. Thanks for doing
Ryan.
this.
Great to see you.
You bet. It is a Wednesday. Charles Adler is going to join us in just a second. We'll take a look at that speech that kind of had the eyes and ears of the world on it, and I don't know that that's an exaggeration. If you look at the response that Mark Carney got in Davos, that in just a moment. But Wednesdays, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper, we have a chance to step out to the mountains and celebrate the memories that lie in wait. This is one of Canada's crown jewels, to say the least. My Jasper Memories, proudly presented by Tourism Jasper, here on Real Talk. And, of course, if you follow me on Instagram, you already know that I spent the better part of last weekend out in Jasper as they kick off Jasper in January, an annual celebration of one of the most magnificent tourist destinations in the world. Now, I told you my stories last week, talked to you about the incredible snow at Marmot Basin, just the wonderful entertainment options that were there as we hopped around between bars and restaurants. But I want you to be able to focus your itinerary. If you and your family have been planning to get out to Jasper over these next couple of weeks, or if maybe you're open to an impromptu trip out to Jasper National Park, there's a ton of stuff happening at Marmot Basin, and that includes s'mores, avalanche awareness days, and of course skiing with Jasper the Bear. Just a ton of activities at a ski resort that I'm going to promise you're not going to wait to ride a lift. I didn't wait for a single second when I was out there last weekend. Just a ton of snow. Check this out at skimarmot.com. As you can see, kids ski free Monday through Friday, and Jasper in January events, of course, continue through every weekend. How good would it be? How good would it be to be roasting marshmallows and putting s'mores together with the kids, or with your best friends, or maybe with your work colleagues at a mountain like this? Absolutely fantastic stuff. You can learn more about their exciting events and details at Marmot Basin in particular at skimarmot.com. Their snow that they're seeing this year has already, the beginning of the year, by the time we ticked into 2026, they had already seen more snow than they did all last year. How cool is that? Don't curd your enthusiasm, friends. Sorry, dad joke. I couldn't help myself. But they also have the Poutine Showdown going on right now in town. And that's an opportunity for you to do your duty, right? To step up for the greater good and rate the poutines at multiple restaurants around town. You can also help crown the Jasper Poutine Champion of 2026. Now, that's a title I'd love to have. Can you imagine being the poutine champion of Jasper? Well, they won't be able to award it unless you're helping them determine who is putting the best one out there. They've also got the Jasper Pond Hockey Tournament coming up. Your chance to register a team of 4, or you can even just head to Lake Mildred to watch this classic winter sport in one of the most scenic venues in Canada. That's on the property at the Fairmont Jasper Park Lodge. They clear the ice. You're surrounded by mountainscape. I mean, it truly is stunning. You're not going to find an outdoor rink with more natural beauty abounding than you will at Lake Mildred. They've also got a snowshoe and fondue tour. They've got brewery tours, moonlight hikes. How cool would that be, especially with the Aurora Borealis absolutely slapping right now. Cupcake decorating workshops. I know that that's going to grab some of your attention and more. Plus, a ton of live music and dining deals that are happening all weekend long. You can get the full event schedule at jasper.travel/January. We'll link to that in the show notes to make it nice and easy for you. But as you can see, the Jasper Pond Hockey Tournament coming up from the 23rd to the 26th. They also have a street party. Your chance to party the night away on Patricia Street with live music. They'll have an ice bar there, street performers, local market stalls, food vendors, and family fun. That's coming up on the 31st of January. Again, all the details at jasper.travel/January. You can also check out my Jasper highlight reel on my Instagram. Go to @RyanJespersen and you can check out some of my adventures in Jasper over the years. I mean, it really, really is a special spot, a place where our family has celebrated for many, many years through the summers, through the falls, but there really is nothing like Jasper in January. Check that out. I loaded up every piece of plaid that I have in the closet to get ready for it. Had my hockey gloves and skates there, my snowboard too. You can pack light as long as you have the essentials to explore those mountains. But truly, an unforgettable experience every time you head out there with family or friends in beautiful Jasper National Park. I'm showing you there my old-fashioned at Moline Range. I highly recommend that as an après activity. And what can beat a hot tub? Looking out at those mountains. Through the beautiful month of January, I know a lot of people kind of shut down this time of year, but it's a perfect time of year to hit the highway out to Jasper and make your own memories. We'd love for you to hashtag MyJasper and Real Talk RJ. If you're posting about your Jasper adventure, you could be featured in a future edition of My Jasper Memories, proudly presented by our friends at Tourism Jasper every Wednesday right here on Real Talk. All right, in just a moment, Senator Charles Adler will join us. This is the first time that he's ever reached out to the show. He's appeared with us many, many times. But this is the first time that he has reached out and requested a spot as his heart, it sounds like, is bursting with Canadian pride. This prompted by a speech by Prime Minister Mark Carney at the World Economic Forum in Davos, one of the most striking addresses of that 2026 forum, at least to this point. Carney arguing that the World War II rules-based international order is not just under strain, it's a rupture. Carney telling world leaders that old assumptions about global cooperation are fading, warning that great powers are increasingly using trade and tariffs and financial systems as tools of coercion rather than collaboration. And the middle powers like Canada must band together or risk being on the menu. We've pulled some moments from that speech to share with you. Johnny, why don't we roll the first one here before we head to the good senator? Here's a portion. This is actually what the Prime Minister shared himself, a speech that he reportedly wrote. Here's a clip of Mark Carney's 15-minute address in Davos.
Canada has what the world wants. We are an energy superpower. We hold vast reserves of critical minerals. We have the most educated population in the world. Our pension funds are amongst the world's largest and most sophisticated investors. In other words, we have capital, talent. We also have a government with immense fiscal capacity to act decisively. And we have the values to which many others aspire. We have a recognition of what's happening and a determination to act accordingly. But we believe that from the fracture, we can build something bigger, better, stronger, more just. That is Canada's path. We choose it openly and confidently, and it is a path wide open to any country willing to take it with us. Thank you.
So there's 10 seconds, 15 seconds have passed as Carney's speech wraps. We're watching it live here in our Real Talk studio, and I get a text from this proud senator out of Manitoba that says, after watching Mark Carney in Davos, my Canadian heart is on fire. Let's find out why as we welcome back Senator Charles Adler. It's good to see you, my friend.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
Has the passion, does it continue to abound? Where's your head at right now?
Yeah, well, I don't want to get into a whole bunch of Trump bashing because I think it hasn't done any of us any good. He owns a lot of real estate, of course, in New York and Florida and elsewhere, but he also, unfortunately, owns a lot of real estate in the minds of Canadians. And I guess that's what brings me to the pride. Over the last number of years, pride in this country sometimes is really not about pride in Canada. It's about, we're kind of like the Americans, but we've got more compassion. We're nicer. We're more polite. And so we always put things in those terms. But yesterday, when I was watching Prime Minister Carney, and pardon me for getting a bit emotional, I was emotional yesterday, and I'm still very emotional about it. Haven't even slept very much because I just can't stop thinking about it. In watching Prime Minister Carney doing only 15 minutes, he does more in 15 minutes than many people do in 15 hours and even 15 years. But the pride in being Canadian wasn't about we're nicer and more compassionate than the Americans. It was about him emphasizing what it is about Canada that makes us a great country. And you can run lots of clips. You can run the entire 15 minutes. I'd suggest for anyone to either read the transcript or get the 15 minutes. But when Prime Minister Carney talked about what it is to be a middle power, which is what Canada is, which is what so many of our trading partners are. I mean, put aside the Americans, put aside the Chinese. I'm talking about all of the other powers that we're doing business with. Many of them, of course, are in Europe, and many of them will no doubt be in South America and other parts of the world. But when he talks about middle powers getting together and middle powers doing business with each other, when he talks about middle powers not lying down to the so-called hegemon, the super power, when he talks about how in the 1940s and 50s and 60s, when Czechoslovakia, which is what it was called back then, now it's the Czech Republic and Slovakia, of course, but when Czechoslovakia was being governed, being stomped on by the Soviet Union, no different than the country next door to Czechoslovakia, Hungary, that I was born in, Václav Havel, the great anti-communist, the great small d Democrat, talked about how it wasn't just that they were being stomped on by the bully, by the so-called hegemon. It was that people accommodated the hegemon because that's what people do. That's what Canada and many middle powers have done. We just kind of never want to tell the Americans, especially Donald Trump, how we really feel about him. So we cower, we bend, we accommodate, and we end up being less than who we really are. And Václav Havel talked about how the shopkeepers would put this slogan in their window, "Workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains," which is something that if someone hasn't really studied what Marxism is all about, will think that Marxism is about the workers. Marxism is about abusing the workers. It's about exploiting the workers. It's about creating a very, very small elite in the name of the workers and then ordering the workers to do things that even the most ravenous, greedy capitalist has never done. Communism is the worst form of totalitarianism ever. And once again, pardon me for being a bit emotional, but I'm a refugee from communism. So when Václav Havel said that the shopkeepers accommodated communism by putting those ridiculous slogans, those ridiculous Marxist slogans in the window, but then something happened and some of the shopkeepers stopped putting the slogan in the window. And something happened called a revolution against communism, a revolution for freedom. And then Mark Carney looked the camera right in the eye, looked the world in the eye, and said, it's time for businesses and countries like Canada, like the other countries in Europe and around the world, it's time to stop putting something in the window which we don't believe in. And yes, it made me damn proud to be a Canadian, because I've been waiting for a Canadian Prime Minister to say that for my entire life.
Chuck, you were a star, a nationally recognized and celebrated national talk radio host for decades, and you and I can both agree that we would never play a 3.5-minute clip from a speech on a terrestrial radio show. But you know what? I'm working for myself here, and this was a remarkable speech, and so I want to do this because this is exactly what you're talking about. This is the portion of that speech about the shopkeeper and the sign in the window and Havel and everything else, and I recognize that there are audience members here that may have heard the speech. Maybe they've listened to it twice, and if so, this is your cue to hit the 30-second skip 6 times. Okay, and get Chuck's response to this. But for those of you that haven't heard it, it's worth it. I've listened to it. This 3 minutes is worth the full listen. I'll get you to dig into it further in just a second. But here's more from Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney in Davos.
It seems that every day we're reminded that we live in an era of great power rivalry, that the rules-based order is fading, that the strong can do what they can, and the weak must suffer what they must. And this aphorism of Thucydides is presented as inevitable, as the natural logic of international relations reasserting itself. And faced with this logic, there is a strong tendency for countries to go along to get along, to accommodate, to avoid trouble, to hope that compliance will buy safety. Well, it won't. So what are our options? In 1978, the Czech dissident Václav Havel, later president, wrote an essay called The Power of the Powerless. And in it, he asked a simple question: how did the communist system sustain itself? And his answer began with the greengrocer. Every morning, this shopkeeper places a sign in his window: "Workers of the world unite." He doesn't believe it. No one does. But he places the sign anyway to avoid trouble, to signal compliance, to get along. And because every shopkeeper on every street does the same, the system persists. Not through violence alone, but through the participation of ordinary people in rituals they privately know to be false. Havel called this living within a lie. The system's power comes not from its truth, but from everyone's willingness to perform as if it were true. And its fragility comes from the same source. When even one person stops performing, when the greengrocer removes his sign, the illusion begins to crack. Friends, it is time for companies and countries to take their signs down. For decades, countries like Canada prospered under what we called the rules-based international order. We joined its institutions, we praised its principles, we benefited from its predictability. And because of that, we could pursue values-based foreign policies under its protection. We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, that trade rules were enforced asymmetrically. And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. This fiction was useful. And American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed the sign in the window. We participated in the rituals. And we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. This bargain no longer works. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition.
So there you have it, Mark Carney, in a speech which did draw a standing ovation in Davos. widely interpreted as a direct rebuke to President Donald Trump, although he didn't mention his name even once.
Best way to do it, they had a standing ovation for Prime Minister Carney. And in the history of Davos and this World Economic Forum, which all the conspiracists love to talk about, Pierre Poilievre, by the way, a few years ago when he was running for leader, said that he would never have anyone in cabinet who has ever attended Davos and the World Economic Forum. So I guess a guy like Mark Carney wouldn't qualify. And I guess a guy like Stephen Harper wouldn't qualify either. And a number of people who are world business leaders, some of them from Alberta and others. But I digress. There have only been 3 standing ovations in the history of the World Economic Forum. Only 3. One was for the person who is one of my heroes, and I hope one of yours as well, Brian, and that's the president of Ukraine. Okay, so that's one of them. The other is the person who is the founder of modern-day South Africa, another person who has fought harder than anyone in the history of the world for not just democracy, but for the liberation of his people in South Africa. That would be Nelson Mandela. So Zelensky got a standing O. Mandela got a standing O. And then Canada's Prime Minister got a standing ovation. It's a very, very tough house. Ryan, you've done a lot of live audiences, and so have I, and so have many other people who watch this program and sometimes don't participate, but they pay lots of attention to this podcast because it's clearly the most important podcast, not just in Alberta, but in Canada. And so they know what I'm talking about. I'm talking to them as well. You know how tough it is to get a standing ovation in one tough house. Well, this tough as nails Prime Minister got a standing ovation in Davos, Switzerland.
We've been paying attention to responses to this speech from broadcasters, from diplomats, from active and retired politicians. One that jumped out at me in particular was a post from diplomat and former detainee in China, Michael Kovrig, who, by the way, was relatively critical, publicly critical of the Canada-China trade deal, said that Mark Carney's trip to China was never just a courtesy call, said looking like a supplicant is undignified. Well, just about a week later, he tweets, check this out, this is the best speech by a world leader that I have read in a very long time. He says, rhetorically, at least, he has met the geopolitical moment. Now, he alludes to the fact, or reminds folks of the fact, that a speech is one thing, words are one thing, actions are another. Based on the 15 minutes that you heard from Canada's Prime Minister, what do you expect to see, not just necessarily coming out of Davos, but moving forward? 2026 is going to be a big year. I mean, CUSMA negotiations are underway. Of course, we have a standoff with the Americans. There are threats to Arctic sovereignty. There could be a federal election. What do you see ahead of you?
Well, first of all, can you imagine if there is a federal election? And I know that the last couple of times we've been on the program, you have been more passionate than ever about your position against separatists in Alberta. Think about this for just a few moments. The separatists in Alberta are always creating this illusion that if America were to exist under Donald Trump and Alberta separated, that somehow Donald Trump would give Alberta and Albertans a wonderful deal. Donald Trump has been not just screwing the world, but screwing his own people. Just look at the favorables and unfavorables. How can any separatist look you in the eye and tell you that Alberta will be happy when none of the states, I'm talking about red states, blue states, every precinct in America is unhappy right now with Donald Trump. The MAGA base is unhappy with Donald Trump. How does a Canadian who happens to be an Albertan, who wants to pull Alberta out of this treasured country, how does he look you in the eye and say, no, Alberta will get a much better deal than Montana and Wyoming and Kansas and California and everyone? Alberta will be happy, whereas 50 states are not happy. Putting all of that aside for just a few moments, if we can. If we're talking about a federal election being called in the next couple of months, if the Conservatives are deciding after Pierre Poilievre gets a 75 or 80, 85%, whatever he gets, if he decides that he wants an election, and the math is still the math, there haven't been enough people to cross the floor, it's entirely possible that Carney government could get defeated. Does anyone honestly think that Pierre Poilievre will defeat Mark Carney? And I've said to some pollster friends of mine the last few days, I'm getting so sick and tired of this question that's always being asked of Canadians in these polls, whether they're polling 500 people or 5,000 people, it doesn't matter. What's your preference for prime minister? It's not a contest. It's not even close. 20 to 25 points is the gap. After this speech, who knows? It may be 30 points. But the larger point is the number one question on every ballot in every election, whether it's a Canadian national election or a provincial election, is who do you want as a leader? If there's an election tomorrow in Alberta, provincial election, yes, it's technically NDP versus UCP, but let's cut to the chase here. We're all grown-ups here. It's Danielle Smith versus Naheed Nenshi. That's what it is. And if there's an election in Canada, with all due respect to your previous guest who's doing his best to win the leadership of the party, that's wonderful. Avi Lewis, he was a great guest. You did a great interview. It's all very interesting. But if there's a contest, it's a two-horse race. One horse is Pierre Poilievre, and the other horse is Mark Carney. Does anyone seriously think that if Pierre Poilievre is ridiculous enough to pull the trigger and have an election, that it won't be the last election of his life as leader, that Mark Carney won't win, and it'll be a majority, and he'll have that majority for the next 4 years? Ryan, am I out to lunch because I was very energized by yesterday's speech, or do you see what I see?
Well, I mean, I would say that I was just on my social media feed yesterday, that promise by Pierre Poilievre years ago, and listen, we will acknowledge, I won't carry water for Poilievre here, but I will say we'll acknowledge a couple of things. Number one, positions can change and evolve over years, and I would love an opportunity to ask him about whether or not he would have attended in Davos, the World Economic Forum, the WEF in Davos, present day, all things considered. I know that among conservatives, there's sort of like they draw these links and lines between like pizza and pedophiles and Hillary Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein and the WEF, and it's kind of become this big thing. But I was noting that promise that he did make, that as Prime Minister, neither he nor any representative of Canada would attend. And then I look at the global response to what Mark Carney said, and not just among the people will describe sort of clapping seals in the crowd and like-minded individuals, and obviously Carney's going to get the applause. I mean, how about this from Jespersen in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says, this speech by Carney had my conservative dad texting me talking about how good it was. I would say that Canadians writ large are in a position where we need steady leadership, common sense leadership, and understanding that while Canada may be a so-called middle power, Canada is still a major player on the global stage, and people look to see what positions Canada takes and where Canada will lend its support and where Canada will spend its capital and where Canada will deploy its troops, as an example, potentially to Greenland. We can talk about that in a second. I think it was incredibly important for Mark Carney to be there. I think that the speech that he delivered obviously resonated in a huge way. I mean, you've got American broadcasters. Let me show you this on my screen. This was, I mean, we can scroll through. I mean, there's tons of these. People can look, on their own and find their own. But there's been a few that jumped out at me in particular, including Chris Hayes. I mean, a well-known American broadcaster says this Mark Carney speech at Davos is one of the best I've seen any politician deliver in a very long time. Actually, we have a clip of one of your Senate colleagues. Johnny, it's the last one I passed along. Why don't we get to this? I mean, here's a Canadian senator. This is pretty remarkable stuff. We'll see if you agree. Peter Boehm, I don't know how well you know Peter, but basically,
he's a colleague of mine. He's the chair of the Foreign Affairs and International Trade Committee that I'm proud to be sitting on. So he's a colleague.
So listen to this, and you can tell me if you agree or not. But here he is on Power and Politics on CBC with David Cochrane just yesterday. Check out what he had to say.
Senator Boehm, I just want to start. I've seen a lot of speeches by a lot of prime ministers. This one is notable. It seems this one stands out. How do you assess what Mark Carney did today?
I think it's the most consequential speech by a Canadian Prime Minister since Louis Saint Laurent in 1947 at the University of Toronto, where he set out the parameters of the rules-based international order as it then was with the founding of the United Nations. And it's like Prime Minister Carney's speech today is in fact a bookend to that, saying, okay, it's been almost 80 years, we're going to have to think differently now. And he provided all of the rationale for it.
Okay, so I guess to answer your question in typical verbose fashion, as I often do, the most consequential speech by a Canadian Prime Minister in 80 years, I'd say it's a damn good thing he was there, and it's a damn good thing he delivered it.
Well, yeah, it's rhetoric to say that, you would ask Pierre Poilievre whether he'd stay with that rule of not allowing people who've been at the WEF to be in his cabinet, his imaginary cabinet, all of that. You'd also want to ask him, I guess, whether if he had his druthers, would he serve coffee to the convoy? How's that working out for you? How'd that work out for the election that you tried to have in the Ottawa area? Imagine someone running in Ottawa after they have served coffee to the convoy. I spend a lot of time for clear and present reasons in Ottawa these days. And there's nothing that the people in Ottawa, and I don't care which class you're talking about, whether you're talking about people are pro-conservative, pro-liberal, it's irrelevant. If there's anything that ticks them off, it's anybody who supported the convoy, because to them, the convoy wasn't theoretical and it wasn't about freedom of expression. To them, the convoy was the freedom that bullies took to try to ruin the lives of the people living in the nation's capital. It wasn't about freedom of expression at all. It was bullying. And as Mark Carney pointed out in this speech, one of the reasons that bullies get away with it, whether it's in a schoolyard or whether it's on the world stage, it's because people accommodate them. And I am so proud to be able to say, and this is why so many Americans have contacted you, me, others on social media and elsewhere, saying they're embarrassed at the moment. They love their country. But at the moment, because of what's going on, they're embarrassed to be Americans, and they're also saying they would love to do an exchange, Trump for Carney. That would be an upgrade. That would be marrying up for the Americans right now. But if we're talking about bullies, once again, whether it's the world stage or the schoolyard, one of the reasons bullies win is because we accommodate them. And Mark Carney spoke for everyone in the world, including the people being bullied by Donald Trump inside the United States, when he said, we're taking it out of the shop window. We're taking the slogan we don't believe in, living a lie. We're going to stop living a lie. We're going to remove the slogan. We're going to stop accommodating the bully. That's why Mark Carney's speech yesterday was popular everywhere in the United States, everywhere in Canada, and everywhere in the world. We are going to stop accommodating the bully.
Dan says there's many reasons why Mark Carney has become so popular and has represented the voice of global pushback, which I think is significant there from Dan in such a short period of time. Others say, Whiteham pointing out that there are way more middle powers when they band together and they're larger than the big powers. And Whiteham probably alluding to the European Union as an example. And we'll talk about that in just a second. I want to get to what more of what Real Talkers have to say. Tracy says, I'm just so thankful that Canada is finally standing up to the bully. Jim says, I would hope that English and social studies high school teachers can use that speech, top shelf thinking skills. Lauren says that's the speech that much of the world needed. What would you say to an audience member that says Charles is still living in 1950 with the Red Scare?
Well, I'll tell you something. I have been scolded by certain people for saying that when I travel outside of Canada and come back to Canada, I kiss the ground. They think it's hype. It's not. My mother and father in 1957 kissed the free soil of Canada. They gave us freedom. They allowed me to breathe free air. I was just a child, 2.5 years old, when my dad put me in the backpack and got me out of that hellhole of communism. But one of the reasons it was good to get me out of the hellhole wasn't because of political freedom of expression, to do what I am passionately crazy about doing on this show. No, it had to do with pneumonia. I had pneumonia 3 times when I was a baby, okay? I had lungs that were being severely affected by the communist air. When I say communist air, we had Avi Lewis on talking earlier about, pollution and wildfires and climate change and all the rest of it. Well, the communists who never cared about workers, that was always baloney, no different than Trump baloney when Trump says he cares about workers, when Trump says he cares about anybody. The communists didn't care about workers. They didn't care about anybody. So the smokestacks were belching that horrible air, that horrible unfiltered air. It was all about coal. It was about burning coal. And for this young child, for yours truly, when I was a child, it was affecting my lungs. And so I was constantly getting pneumonia, nearly died 2 out of the 3 times. And when my mother asked the doctor, what is it that I can do to save the life of my child because he will die? And the doctor said, the only way your child will live, the only way your child will have an adult life is if you get him out of that country. And my mother said, how the hell do we get out of this country? This country is a prison. And then there was an uprising in 1956. And my dad put me in the backpack and got me out. Tens of thousands of Hungarians got out. And they got out not necessarily because of the dramatic reason that I needed to get out. It wasn't to save their lives, but it was certainly to save their freedom to get free air. So when someone wants to say that I still live in the 1950s, well, hell, I was born in the 1950s, and it was because of the open arms of this country, the generosity of this country. That's why I was able to breathe free air. That's why I was able to, and I still can't believe this happened for me, I was able to command a national audience, a large audience in Alberta, in British Columbia, Manitoba, Ontario, you name it. And that's what has fueled me. Now, the story of what happened to me in the 1950s and the story of my family and all the rest of it, those stories that I tell are stories that people relate to no matter what part of the world they come from, and whether they've been here for 5 generations, 6 generations, like you are a lifetime Albertan. I can't remember now how many generations you come from, Ryan.
6.
But it doesn't matter. 6 generations. The point is, whether we're 6th generation Canadian or 1 generation, regardless of what the planet we come from, everybody in this country relates to the story of a child who is helped by his family, rescued by his family, and rescued by a country called Canada. And will I ever stop telling that story? No. And so for the listener, and I appreciate the listener sending the note about me living in the 50s, you're damn right I live in the 50s. And the 50s I live in tie into 2025 and 2026. And the 2026 that I live in right now with Mark Carney sealing the deal that Louis Saint Laurent talked about in 1948. In 1948, and by the way, I've got a special feeling for Louis Saint Laurent, of course, because Louis Saint Laurent was the prime minister of this country who opened the doors to my family and many other Hungarian families and other families who are coming in from all over the world. But Louis Saint Laurent talked about the new world rules-based system that was going to allow Canada to prosper as much as possible. And now we're in a system where there is an American boot to our throat, more specifically, Trump's boot to our throat. And so you've got Mark Carney at the other end of all this, delivering a consequential speech saying, no, we're not going to let anybody put their boot to our throat. What we're going to do is create a new system where we invite all the middle powers, all of whom have the boot to the throat, and we're going to deal with them. And so we're going to work around the United States. And you know what will happen? People will say, well, Trump is going to say some nasty things about Mark Carney and he'll take revenge on Canada. The fact is, America is still about business. And the businesses of America ultimately will still want to do a deal with Canada. Why? Because we're a wonderful customer. We're the best customer that anybody could ever have, just like we're the best neighbor anybody could ever have, just like it is the best country to live in. And for the people who want to separate from this country, whether they're based in Quebec or they're based in Alberta, I'm sorry. We've got the best leader in the world, in the best country in the world. You can talk about separatism all day long. You will never win. Never.
I love the passion. Charles Adler, our guest, of course, Canadian Senator, award-winning, Lifetime Achievement Award-winning broadcaster. M. Aitken in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says that will go down in history, much like a JFK or an MLK Jr. speech. My grandchildren will be watching this in the years ahead. Pongi says, I read the speech last night, so I didn't miss a word. You can find the transcript online. Says it's truly very representative of how most Canadians are feeling. I felt like he spoke for us. JJ Needs a Nap says, my American family members were sending texts to me from Maine and New York and Florida to commend our PM in his speech while lamenting, earmuffs kids, their orange shit stack of a leader. Says JJ, admittedly, my relatives are Democrats. TC says the Carney clip will remain a big part of history. I probably listened to it 10 times. Michael says historians will probably call that speech the sign in the window speech. It was absolutely brilliant. Another says he represented the Canadian people and how we feel. I don't ever remember a leader delivering such a proudly Canadian speech in my life. Nia, thanks for your YouTube channel membership. Nia, we want to welcome our new YouTube channel members. This show, including Spartisan Hack, which might be the coolest online handle I've ever seen in my life. Welcome to YouTube. Your membership here on Real Talk. Nia says that speech felt truly Canadian. The Prime Minister spoke out loud to what many, if not most of us, are feeling. Chuck, I want to play one more clip for you and this audience and then ask you about Greenland, because everybody at Davos is talking about Greenland. It's gone from trolling to a very real possibility. The Danes are mobilizing troops. Canada's musing about deploying military resources. We're hanging out with Senator Charles Adler right here on Real Talk, and these conversations are happening with the support of partners of ours like North Road Investment Council. You can find them online at northroadic.com. Want to give a big shout out to Real Talker Michael, who just reached out. Let us know that he's booked a consultation. He's booked an appointment with Marshall and the team at North Road. Michael promised to let us know how that meeting goes. We're proud to partner with our friends at North Road, working with established professionals or business owners that are asking big financial questions like how you should pay yourself, dividends or salary. Where should you put your savings? Into a TFSA or an RRSP, or maybe just leave investment in your corporation for your eventual retirement. You know, at North Road Investment Council, these are the questions they're helping clients answer every single day. You can learn more about what they do and how they do it by visiting their website, northroadic.com. And I want to make sure you join us in our next episode of the show. Carrie Williams from North Road is going to join us, with December's credit cards in the mailbox. Our New Year's resolutions, maybe. I'm not judging you, but maybe already failing. Mine are long gone. It's a great time to talk about better ways to manage and communicate our spending for 2026, and that's exactly where we're going to go. We're going to talk to tightwads, we're going to talk to spendthrifts, and unconflicted consumers. When Carrie joins us, that'll be on our January 22nd episode of the show. Make sure you catch that, and of course, you can always connect with the team at North Road by visiting northroadic.com. An iconic production is coming to the Citadel Theatre, one of Canada's largest and most plugged-in theaters. You want to see great theater, you go to the Citadel Theatre in downtown Edmonton. Everybody knows that. And on January 24th, they will kick off Death of a Salesman, running through till February 15th. Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, a poignant story of a traveling salesman grappling with unfulfilled dreams and strained family bonds. It's a timeless drama exploring ambition, identity, and the pursuit of success, revealing the fragility of the human spirit and the yearning for validation. A timeless classic that has shaped generations. You can get your tickets, again, January 24th through the 15th of February by visiting citadeltheater.com. And Real Talk Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members have until noon Mountain Time today, that's the 21st of January, to follow the instructions that we've passed along to you to register to win 2 tickets, you and a guest, to go see Death of a Salesman at the Citadel Theatre. Again, we'll draw those winning names at noon Mountain Time today. We'll announce our winners in our next episode of the show. And we also encourage you to make sure that you check out the Royal Alexandra Hospital Foundation online. You know, the Royal Alex, as it is known through the Metro Edmonton region, and for that matter across Western Canada, marking 125 years this year. It's a huge milestone. And the doctors and nurses, administrators, everybody there will tell you that they're also just getting started. You can learn more about the legacy of care at the Royal Alexandra Hospital by visiting royalalex.org. And that's also where you can commit to a donation. Help the Royal Alex enter its next 125 years equipped as it needs to be to continue to provide the research, training, and education that it does to support the hospital's most pressing needs for the patients of today, tomorrow, and many years into the future. You can consider a one-time gift, perhaps in honor of a loved one that spent time at the Royal Alex, or a monthly gift to ensure that these legacies of care continue into the next century. Again, that's royalalex.org. Senator Charles Adler, our guest. Want to thank Parker Posey, I like that handle, for the contribution to our YouTube Super Chat. We also had one from Noob, who kicked in $5, Chuck. That's Noob's way of buying you a beer next time you're in Edmonton. Says, you know it's going to be a great show when Chuck shows up. Does anybody in the Red Chamber, anybody in the Senate call you Chuck, by the way, or are we reserving that right? Are we being unprofessional here?
No.
Okay.
People, for all the stuff about formalities, and of course I'm not speaking for the Senate, I'm speaking for myself as always.
Yes.
But some people call me Senator, some people call me Charles, some people call me Chuck, some people call me Bud. Very Canadian thing to do.
We'll let people know behind the scenes. I've called you the Titan of Talk for about 10 years now, so I just call you Titan with a capital T when we're texting. Let me get to another. This is another snippet from Mark Carney's speech. I guess by the end of today, we'll probably have played the whole thing through. It's only 15 minutes in its entirety, but I want to talk to you about Greenland. Huge implications here. It's being felt around the world, but here's more from Mark Carney in Davos.
Multilateral institutions on which the middle powers have relied, the WTO, the UN, the COP, the architecture, the very architecture of collective problem solving are under threat. And as a result, many countries are drawing the same conclusions, that they must develop greater strategic autonomy in energy, food, critical minerals, in finance and supply chains. And this impulse is understandable. A country that can't feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself has few options. When the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself. But let's be clear-eyed about where this leads. A world of fortresses will be poorer, more fragile, and less sustainable. And there's another truth. If great powers abandon even the pretense of rules and values for the unhindered pursuit of their power and interests, the gains from transactionalism will become harder to replicate. Hegemons cannot continually monetize their relationships. Allies will diversify to hedge against uncertainty. They'll buy insurance, increase options in order to rebuild sovereignty. Sovereignty that was once grounded in rules but will increasingly be anchored in the ability to withstand pressure.
Mark Carney speaking in Davos at the World Economic Forum. If you're just joining our live stream presented by California Closets, we're talking to Senator Charles Adler about it. Everybody in Davos. I saw the Swiss delegation. Macron referenced it. Of course, the French perspective yesterday. The Danes are speaking out. Everybody's talking about Greenland. This is something that is alienating the United States from its allies, from its NATO allies. It's putting the world on alert. Just your thoughts on where this is all headed and what you're looking to see collectively come out of the WEF.
So we could talk about Greenland and the critical minerals that are all under ice. We could talk about the Golden Dome that Donald Trump wants to build and all of that. But I don't want to get lost in rhetoric. I'd rather go after principles, because that's why the Mark Carney speech was so successful. Look, countries need to be able to defend themselves. But if they can't defend themselves against what Mark Carney calls the hegemons, the superpowers, then countries get together with other countries so they can defend themselves. Donald Trump and his speechwriter, Stephen Miller, have both said these words: a country that cannot defend itself cannot maintain its sovereignty. So from their perspective, if Greenland, or if Denmark, which owns Greenland, if they can't defend themselves from the United States military, then Greenland doesn't deserve to be sovereign. Now, just think about this, and I am using my words very, very carefully, not because of what I do these days in Ottawa, but because I don't ever want to take the concept that I'm about to lay out for you and take it for granted, and I'm not using it as a gimmick. I want everyone to take this very seriously. To say to a country like Greenland or Denmark, which owns Greenland, to say to Denmark, if you can't defend Greenland against the United States military, then you don't deserve to be sovereign. And once again, I want to be careful about this, but I want to bounce this off you, Ryan. Is there a rapist? Is there a serial rapist anywhere, living or dead, that didn't buy into the same notion? Isn't that what the serial rapists were essentially saying to the women? You're not strong enough to defend yourself against me, so I'm going to literally take you. That is how the United States under Donald Trump, and I want to emphasize, I don't think of it as my American friends and my American neighbors and my American family. I think of this as Donald Trump and his acolytes. They are speaking to Greenland the way a rapist speaks to a woman. Now, that is why this is important. That is why it's important for Canada to support Denmark and for all the other countries in NATO to support Denmark. It's not about Greenland. It's about defending the honor of sovereign countries against what Mark Carney calls the hegemon. It's about defending sovereignty versus the bully. And naturally, Greenland can't beat up the American military, but Greenland, allied with Canada and all of the other countries, can look at the bully and say, no, you're not crossing the line. There's a red line that you're not crossing. And that's what this is about. So we can focus on critical minerals in Greenland. We can focus on the small population of Greenland, or we can focus, in my opinion, on the big picture of how the world needs to deal with bullies. And once again, that is why the Mark Carney speech is important, because he reminded people that we do not have to cower and submit and say things we don't believe in. We don't have to live with a lie to accommodate the bully. As a matter of fact, let's not accommodate the bully.
RH representing big time in our super chat today, powered by Park Power RH with a $10 kick in. And just wait, Charles, RH is buying both of us lunch. Says Canadians will not vote to make Canada's very own Oswald Mosley Prime Minister. Mosley, of course, a British fascist, 1920s, 1930s, says the vast majority have rejected the Continental Confederacy project that he represents. Noob representing again says, Chuck, I sure appreciate your thoughtfulness. And then RH with $50, if you can believe it, Chuck, in support of the show. Incredible. Says the recently reported, just in time for Carney's speech, American invasion of Canada model, insurgency and all, produced by the Canadian military, should give Canada's fifth column pause. You can dig into the fifth column idea. I understand it to be kind of like a subsect, like kind of a group within a population, basically insurrectionists, right? Yeah. It says, the Canadian forces have said, stand to, and Canadians are hearing them loud and clear. Let me play you a portion of what the president, what Donald Trump has said. He's now arrived in Davos and speaking to reporters, including a response to what Mark Carney had to say just the day before. Here's a little bit from American President Donald Trump.
We're building a golden dome that's going to, just by its very nature, going to be defending Canada. Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your prime minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
Canada lives because of the United States, says the president. Remember that, Mark, before the next time you make your statements.
Well, that is how an extortionist, that is how a mobster, that is how a rapist speaks to the potential victim. Canada wouldn't be alive. We wouldn't be able to feed ourselves. We wouldn't have jobs. We'd have no self-esteem. We would be on the, level with Somalia. We'd be starving, and we'd be run by gangs if it wasn't for the Americans. no Canadian with any self-respect, whether they're as articulate as Mark Carney or not, it's got nothing to do with it. No person who's watching or listening to this right now who calls themselves Canadian, no Canadian with any self-respect should be agreeing with Donald Trump. And I've got to say, Ryan, I guess something I've been holding on to for quite a while. The most upsetting thing to me about being Canadian these days is the number. It's not one or two. It's a number. They're in Alberta, they're in Ontario, they're in Manitoba, they're everywhere. There's a significant percentage of Canadians who not just sympathize with Donald Trump, they say things to you and me and others like, you just don't understand how Donald Trump is this incredibly intelligent, strategic chess master. And the things that you hear aren't the things that we hear. He speaks in a language that we understand. I'm sick and tired of Canadians telling us that we just don't understand what an incredible 8-dimensional chess player Donald Trump is. When Donald Trump is saying to every single Canadian, because yes, he's mentioning Mark Carney, but it's not about Mark Carney. It's about all of us. It's about 40 million Canadians. And when Donald Trump says to 40 million proud Canadians that we wouldn't exist, we'd be starving if it wasn't for the United States, I think it's time for us to tell some of our Canadian friends and family members, stop telling me how Donald Trump is an exalted, strategic person who we need to understand. I don't need to understand someone who tells me that I cannot feed my family without them. We'll find a way to feed our families. Thank you.
That's Senator Charles Adler joining us live in a special edition of the show. It's always wonderful to have you here, Chuck. Thanks for reaching out. As you know, the door is always open. We've got Dan chiming in our chat. He says, I've disagreed with Charles Adler in the past on different topics, and I've agreed with him on others, but the passion he exudes with his love of Canada may bring me to tears. That from Dan.
Thank you.
Good to see you. We'll talk again soon. That's Senator Charles Adler appearing right here on Real Talk. Send us your thoughts to talk@ryanjespersen.com. I want to get to more of what you have to say in the live chat. Plus, we got to ask this show's technical director, John Hicks, what's going on? There's a trend, a very encouraging and very cool trend. Well, I got to ask you I don't understand. You're the tech guy, not me. I'll save my question for just a second. Before we do, I want to remind everybody about what our friends at Solar by Kuby are doing. And this in particular is a message to those of you that are serving our communities as first responders. I'm talking about police, firefighters, paramedics, EMTs, nurses, search and rescue personnel, 911 dispatchers, even active members of the Canadian Forces across Alberta and BC. Kuby's new initiative, the Powering Those Who Protect program, is offering a 5% discount on solar systems for those first responders. Now, keep in mind, this discount can also be combined with existing rebates and government incentives that'll help lower the upfront cost of going solar, plus improve your return on that investment. Kuby's been in the game for more than a decade now, and they've risen from 2 oil field electricians and 1 pickup truck all the way up to Western Canada's busiest solar installer. You can get a free solar quote anytime by visiting their website, kuby.ca. That's Kuby.ca. Speaking of Alberta institutions, our friends at Friesen Brothers have been in the business of putting good food around family dinner tables for more than 70 years. And of course, a big part of that is looking ahead to the future. And that's why Friesen Brothers is proud to present the future of Alberta food. This is an artisan cuisine challenge in conjunction with the culinary arts students at NAIT, featuring 6 teams of Alberta food professionals. This event will challenge their butchering, their baking, their cooking, their hospitality expertise, plus their creativity, of course, focusing on really great food. These 6 teams will create 24 original dishes, all made from scratch, and you can check them out. The culmination of this challenge, a sit-down reception on February 21st at Ernest's Dining Room at SAIT. Starts at 6 p.m. A limited number of tickets available. It sells out every year. If you want to try these delicious dishes, check out friesen.com/challenge. That's FRESON.com/challenge. Friesen Brothers proudly presenting the future of Alberta food. And our friends at Play Alberta reminding you that a winner in Sturgeon County just scored $100,000 on Cash Machine. You know, from major casino winners every hours to jackpots worth millions, hundreds of popular games to money that stays in the province, there's never been a better time to sign up for Play Alberta. You can download the app today to get started with casino, sports, and lottery all in one app. Of course, you got to be 18 or over to play. And if you do gamble, please use your game sense. A reminder that every Thursday on the show, Play Alberta presents Alberta Wins. These are stories of Albertans making an impact around the province, across the country, and around the world. Submit your Alberta win today in an email to talk@ryanjespersen.com, and you could qualify to win 2 tickets to the Play Alberta Suite at the Oilers game on March 21st. It's Real Talk night in the Play Alberta box as the Oilers host the Tampa Bay Lightning. One Real Talk supporter's going to win 2 tickets into that box by submitting an Alberta win to talk@ryanjespersen.com. Alberta Ganger in our live chat says it's nice that Canada now has some vision and drive, probably the most willingness to broaden our relationships since the Westminster Treaty. That's a great comment from Alberta Ganger. Okay, what's going on here in our YouTube channel memberships? We talked about how our YouTube channel members get
that's
specific
what you're
perks.
asking
Yeah. Did you see I baited the hook and I let it sit there for a second?
I thought you were going to ask me about planking or to teach you how to Dougie or something.
Like the trends. That's when you're in your pop culture.
And then I'd be like,
role.
Ryan, that was 10 years ago, but ask me about other stuff.
I could probably stand to do a little bit more planking. Hey, Explorer Hollis and Noob Try Again both gifted 5 YouTube channel memberships in our chat today. I've never seen that before. And so that means that Sandy Hall and Kenzie and Jordan and Waleed and Belias, Meta Modern,
it's like Romper Room,
Emily G, Peter, East Coast Stoner, and Carmen have all received gift memberships. This is cool.
I see little Billy and
I see
baby Stuart.
Johnny, it's your birthday. But what's this all about? Is this a new thing?
No, it's not new. And when you say they gifted, they're also gifted because they're smart, intelligent Real Talkers who know that part of being a member also allows you to gift up to 5 trial memberships for 1 month.
Okay.
You pay them and you gift them away, and then you're kind of like saying, hey, do you guys want to try this out?
Oh, cool.
And then if that person wants to continue on after the month, they can. So we've got a whole lot of new green fonts in the chat today.
I love
all happy
that.
people who are high-fiving back to Noob and Explorer Hollis, who, I don't know, I guess they just wanted to make the party a little better on a hump day today.
I love that. And shout out to those two. So you're saying any YouTube channel member can gift memberships and give folks a perspective, a peek onto
They're
what
drawing
membership
them
life
in.
looks like.
Yeah.
Member life. Matthew Yegg says, what we're talking about is here, says it may not be all Americans, but we can't ignore the fact that 30% of Americans polled do support exactly what we've just discussed with the senator. He says that is tens of millions of people. And Matthew's absolutely right. Vamp Fashions says Pierre Poilievre has made some of the most inspiring speeches glorifying Canadians ever written, yet all of you people refuse to hear them. Vamp, feel free to pass along snippets for our consideration. I'd love to play them. We continue to work on an interview with Mr. Poilievre. I would love to have him on the show to pick his brain. The door is always open. I wonder if he would change his tune on whether or not he sees the World Economic Forum as a priority for Canada to be at. This is where everybody is. This is where global leaders are at, putting their heads together, discussing some of the existential threats. And that's not fear-mongering. There are literally existential threats in play right now from the President of the United States, or at least starting with him, including Russia. China continues to be a threat. Mark Carney has discussed that as well. Arctic sovereignty is a very real issue. And I don't know how Canada seriously looks to build or strengthen or maintain alliances and ensure our security and continued prosperity without being in those rooms, without having those conversations. I wonder if Pierre Poilievre would change his tune. I wonder if he would have seen it differently, the priority or his willingness at least to attend or send a Canadian delegation there. JJ says, the WEF, World Economic Forum, is not a perfect entity. There's a lot lacking in what they do and how they do it. JJ could probably say the same thing about the UN, right? Anyway, it goes on to say it reflects capitalist personas in large ways. That said, its purpose is sound, and it simply should improve. Plain Power says many of our political candidates look to government as a way to profit. Not all, but many. Tracy just says, wow, Donald Trump is back to bullying for sure. I'm not sure that Donald Trump ever stopped bullying, to be honest with you, but I thought that was pretty interesting. Anytime you're referring to a world leader by their first name, I you know what I mean? It's just kind of an interesting thing. I remember when Donald Trump referred to Prime Minister Trudeau as Justin, and it was just seen as, there are friendly ways to do it, I think, if there's an established rapport there, but it's also an effective way, I think, of really talking down to somebody, reminding somebody that you are the elephant in the bed that can roll over and squash your partner anytime.
He uses it both ways, though. Like when he was complimenting Carney when they've had their meeting, he called him Mark. But yeah, I also want to comment on the contrast of whether you agree or voted for the Liberals and Mark Carney or not. Like that was a very eloquent speech. It was very well written. It was very thoughtful. Most people, even if you didn't understand the particulars exactly of what each paragraph was talking about, you could see what the general tone of it was. It has a layer of hope to it. I mean, there's no one out there, even conservatives, who can't say that wasn't well written. But then yesterday, we're also watching live, Donald Trump is talking about the year past and all their accomplishments yesterday. And every time he mentions an accomplishment, he throws in an insult for another person that didn't want it to happen or wasn't pushing for this. And there was a great podcaster on there. Mention his name if you want. Yesterday we saw him on who commented on Trump after he spoke yesterday. You said you knew who he was. He was on with. You're always on with this guy on CBC.
Oh, yeah.
I forget the
Andrew
podcaster.
Nichols. No. Wait. Andrew Nichols is a CBC host.
Anyways, he had a podcaster on, and he made a good point that Trump, when he's doing this insult / compliment thing back and forth, it's almost like he's not trying to get the thing he wants. He wants you to disagree with you. He wants you to not like what he's saying, and that's kind of where he wins, right? And it's such a stark contrast to what we're just hearing from Mark Carney yesterday. Whether you agree, I know there's lots of people out there screaming WEF and one world order and conspiracy or whatever, but I mean, the whole one world order thing is it's a little bit of it's just a way to say like things are different. And I loved how he didn't mention Donald Trump yesterday, but did in not so many words.
It was kind of all about him, but he didn't mention him even once.
Because Mark knows if you throw that out there, it's just bait. He's just going to rip you apart. He did it anyways, right? Without even hearing his name. So
it's awesome to see Don Levers watching us live stream on Facebook today. What's up, Don? Don was last on our show right around Remembrance Day.
Yeah, that was good. That was
an
great.
Author and a historian, and Don just loves this country and says, I've always enjoyed and respected Charles Adler's comments. Today I feel even stronger about that. He says, I always enjoy your segments with him. Great job as always, Don. Good to hear from you as well. Ms. Katie says, folks are welcome to just move to the U.S. if they want to be American so bad. Nathan's watching us on YouTube. What's up, Nate? Says, my God, compare those two speeches, and Donald Trump just sounds like an insane, evil villain.
That's what I'm saying. The contrast yesterday was wild. It was just insane. And it really, it makes you, I agree with Charles Adler. I'm proud to be Canadian. I'd be proud if got to be careful how I say this, but I would be proud if Pierre Poilievre went to the World Economic Forum and talked in the similar vein of being proud to be Canadian, being proud to hold hands with our international partners, etc., moving forward, even if he didn't say New World Order, but had that air about it. I mean, that's what I was proud of yesterday. I wasn't, I'm not, some sub for Carney. I was happy to hear this on a world stage because we're hearing so much rhetoric like Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's kind of like, with the Carney thing, and I know that this is, will come across for a lot of folks, and I do see, sort of like really, really ardent partisan conservatives, and there's nothing wrong with that, guys, but you're in the chat here, and you're having a really hard time with basically everybody blowing sunshine up Mark Carney's ass.
Well, that's why I
after
said
this
that,
speech,
because
right?
I would give
But
Pierre the
here's
same
thing,
credit.
Is like, you know, and I'm always tempted to make sports metaphors. And I don't know that I need to here, but it's possible. Let me just put it this way. You know, to cheer for, here's a great metaphor. You know, if you couldn't stand the Pittsburgh Penguins, and if you couldn't stand the fact that in 2004, 2005, 2006, your team, your favorite team, was losing out on the draft lottery while the Penguins were adding like Sidney Crosby and they were adding Marc-Andre Fleury, and then they got Evgeny Malkin. You just absolutely hate the Pittsburgh Penguins. But then one day in Vancouver, if I can bastardize Gord Downie for a second, in early 2010, that Sidney Crosby fella that plays for the Penguins that you can't stand is wearing the Team Canada jersey and calls for a pass from Jerome McGinley off the boards and sneaks one past Ryan Miller to score the golden goal and to win the gold medal for Canada. For a moment, were you able to set aside your disdain? No, I don't actually believe anybody actually hates Sidney Crosby, but were you able to set aside your disdain for the Pittsburgh Penguins and Sidney Crosby for but a moment? Because what he did served Canada's greater good. I mean, that's the case here. Mark Carney, like it or not, is the Prime Minister of Canada right now. And when Mark Carney spoke in Davos, he was speaking on behalf of Canada.
Yeah.
He was representing Canada.
He wasn't speaking.
If Pierre Poilievre was there at that podium, then I would be
100%.
cheering for Pierre Poilievre to succeed as well, because I'd be cheering for Canada.
100%. I mean, if Pierre Poilievre had won the election and went to the WEF and was dragging Canada across the finish line, however and the Conservatives would have been going about it, and he gave a speech in that vein, I would not come on the show the next day and try to take the wind out of his sails. I would say, God damn, he wrote that whole thing himself. Here's a round of applause. Here's your flowers. Even though I don't agree with you, even though I didn't vote for you, here's your flowers. And I think that's where some of the conspiracy theorists, I'll just say it, the chemtrail bros or whoever out there, they won't budge an inch. They won't give 1 ounce of applause. You know, it's kind of sad.
Well, I mean, and
because it's doing a disservice to our country, and I think Adler was trying to say that.
Well, the majority of Canadians are smart enough to, I think, at the end of the day, when they're electing a leader, whether they're a party member, you know, interesting. We haven't really talked at all about what Avi Lewis brought to the table today. I thought it was a really interesting conversation. Compelling guy, passionate guy.
Very intelligent.
I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that he's putting in front of
I like
us.
how when you were making faces, he's like, why are you looking at me like that? I'm not trying to make groceries communist, or you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, he's got some big plans, and that's great though. That's not bad. That's great. People can get behind that.
But he saw you weren't agreeing with him.
But which is also awesome. And but I would say that like Canadians understand that we need to have serious people in the room. We need to have serious people around the tables. And that's what the leader of every political party needs to represent to Canadians, is that they can be a serious person here at home and on the global stage.
It's funny you say that, because I went to the Oilers game last night with a friend of mine. He's a conservative. I'm not going to say his name. If you saw me at the game, you saw me with him.
Show us his driver's license.
No, but I don't ask him if he's conservative, but I hear the guy talk, and he hears me talk, and we know each other, right? And last night he said about Carney's speech, he said, when I listen to that guy talk, and he's a real estate agent. There's levels to adulting is what I was getting at, because you were just talking about serious people. I feel like I'm below my friend in terms of adulting. He's a little higher than me.
I don't know about that.
But he made a comment last night. He's like, wow, when I hear Carney talk, he's a level of an adult that I'll never reach.
Yeah.
And he's a serious guy. And it's not wrong to give him his props, even if you don't agree with him, when he makes thoughtful statements.
And if he blows it, then call him out on it.
Do it.
And
Yeah,
next
sure.
election, you don't have to vote for him. But the fact of the matter is, right now, he's our prime minister. I'm not saying you got to walk in lockstep with him and clap every single time he says something. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes I hope most times I would hope that we can separate. We talk a lot about politics on the show, obviously, but at some point we have to look as Canadians at what our reality is right now and what we're going to do about it. A great comment here in our live chat from Aurora Astra, who says, as somebody who leans conservative, it's really frustrating watching conspiracy thinking and disdain for expertise bleed into the movement, pushing voters away and hurting the cause and, quite honestly, hurting our country. That from Aurora Astra. That's an absolutely fantastic comment. Keep them coming to talk at ryanjespersen.com. I mean, obviously, this is something that, these conversations are going to continue. The Greenland story is this is chapter 2. Chapter 1.
And the Trump sharing of the photo yesterday just pushed that even farther after our show. If people didn't see it, it was a doctored photo, but he still shared it.
You want me to call it up?
Yeah, he still shared it via his Truth Social, which is a map. And this is what we've been talking about. And even I've been like, nah, that's not going to happen. But it's hard to think it's not when Donald Trump shares a picture of himself in the Oval Office with a map of the Western Hemisphere.
So it's
and it's all American flags except for
Venezuela,
Mexico.
the United States, Canada, and Greenland. And it's all got the Stars and Stripes on it. And I mean, like you said,
this is a doctored photo.
It's a
but
doctored
he shared
photo,
it.
but he shared it.
Yeah, he liked it,
which is preposterous. It's preposterous. You're taking direct shots and also making a mockery of the sovereignty of 3 different nations. It's insane. I love this from Amanda Lynn, who says, I appreciate you all coming on and telling the truth. I don't watch any news unless it's independent, like Real Talk. She says, I thought Mark Carney's speech was fantastic. Amanda Lynn, it's awesome to have you in our live chat today. Ryan says, I'm not a separatist, but I don't like Mark Carney, and I really dislike Donald Trump. Ryan, totally cool. Welcome to the live chat. Happy to have you here. Ryan says, by the way, I'm also one of the people Canada would need in the event of a situation.
And we're holding back talking about...
I don't know what that means.
Justin
Well,
Trudeau.
I think I do know what it means.
Katy Perry just walking around in Davos like they're getting engaged. It's wild. It is wild. They're just walking around like paparazzi all around them, holding hands. Oh, wild.
It's a real thing.
Yeah, it's real.
You sort of think, like, every once in a while, like 2 celebrities, whether there's like I'm proud of us, by the way, for waiting an hour and 50 minutes.
I was going to say it has nothing to do. It's
nothing to do
the
with
least
anything.
important thing in the world.
It's
and that's
not
why
really
I
of any
waited.
consequence.
Yeah.
But it is still pretty interesting
It's just wild to see.
that the former prime minister is dating one of the biggest pop stars in history.
And now they're walking around holding hands and smiling at the cameras and in Davos. Well,
'Cause
a very serious thing is going on, and they're like,
yeah.
I kissed a girl.
Good for him. Good for her.
Did.
I hope they're both happy. It really has no bearing on anything.
Oh, I'm sure they're happy. Couple of good-looking kids like that, mattress dancing around the world. You go, girls.
Mattress dance. Plain Power says Pierre is now jumping out with another claim of around the carbon tax. Says he's almost as I hesitate to read stuff like this. This is like, it's interesting. Before I will read your comment. Well, the comment is Plain Power says Pierre is almost as big of an idiot as Trump. Being an independent, like was just referenced in our chat, there's pros and cons. There's benefits here. We have to fight a little harder to get big interviews. Now that we keep getting the big interviews, it gets a little bit easier. But we really fight for our position, fight for our spot as Alberta's talk show of record. It also allows us to speak quite a bit more freely, right? Like I could never just say fuck on terrestrial radio. But I do pick my spots because both of our parents, our parents are listening, Johnny, and
every day.
We want to be careful.
Every day.
But I do want to reflect your comments and the spirit and the passion behind your comments. And I also want to acknowledge that we don't want to go around just calling people idiots and fools and some of the things that are out there. But I will reference that Pierre Poilievre did come out with a carbon tax thing, a comment just a short time ago, and I noticed it as a matter of fact as a response or a quote tweet from Corey Hogan, who's the one of 2 Liberal MPs in the entire province of Alberta, a former member of the Real Talk editorial board. But Pierre Poilievre posting earlier today. You can see this, and here's the tweet from the leader of Canada's official opposition. Pardon me, that was yesterday on the 20th of January. It says, Carney's new carbon tax will add 17 cents a litre at the pump. Canadians can't afford another Liberal tax on gas, groceries, and home heating. Signed to take the tax off. Whatever happened to axe the tax? Signed to take the tax off and make life affordable. Now, this was the post from the leader of the official opposition, like just several hours after Carney's speech in Davos. And an interesting point from Corey Hogan, Liberal MP out of Calgary, says, Pierre, the consumer carbon tax is gone, and the piano has 87 other keys. Feel free to try some of them out.
Oh, wow.
Which I thought was a decent response, but it just, and I understand that Polyev, every once in a while, the Oilers go back to putting McDavid and Draisaitl together when they need a goal. Yeah. Sometimes what has always worked for you will work again, but it just struck me as the timing, clapping back on the carbon tax at a time where literally everybody in the world is talking about Carney's speech in Davos just seemed like a strange, I think that people were probably looking for Pierre Polyev at that time to say something poignant or insightful or interesting about what he would say there, or what he hopes to see come out of Davos, or his response. I just
that's what I think the leader of the opposition would do, is comment on the substance of the speech. He is. That's why I said zing to Corey, because he is kind of playing chopsticks.
Yeah.
And take the tax off does not hit as hard as axe the tax.
Yeah. White Dream says, Jesper, your Crosby Penguins analogy is so old. You got to acknowledge it worked, though, didn't it? It worked. On the fly, it really worked. But he goes on to say, or they go on to say, a modern example of this in a few weeks will be with the San Jose Sharks and Macklin Celebrini.
Anytime anyone mentions Crosby and old, I just think about how many years he's got left. Yeah. God, he's given us so much.
I hope he plays till 45. Ms. B offering potential improvement to my metaphor. I'm always open to consideration. They say another good metaphor, Jespo, could have been Brad Marchand or Drew Doughty because they're usually real pains in our ass.
Sure. Here's a metaphor. The Super Bowl's coming up. Everyone knows this. You have a team. The other team wins. You hate that team. It's usually the Patriots or whatever, that team that you just hate that's been winning forever, or the Chiefs. But you go to the locker room, and what's the other team say? They're an incredible ball club. Amazing team. The quarterback, the coaching, props to them. That's what I didn't hear. And it's like, it's almost silent. You're showing people in the States, people across the world are saying this was an incredibly well-written speech, even if you don't agree with it.
Yeah.
And the right is just silent. It's strange.
Huge shout out to RH. You don't have to donate to the show for us to fall in love with you and really appreciate you, but RH, what you're doing today really, makes a big difference for us. Another $10 into the super chat says, Skippy is not a statesman. He's Jespersen. He's a Jefferson Davis spouting a bleeding Kansas narrative to a gang of bushwhackers. I feel like we need to get RH on the show. Just these zingers. It's been zinger after zinger. Fantastic stuff. Donna loved your reference to mattress dancing. Says, I haven't really laughed in days, Johnny. She says, thanks so much for that.
Well, I
appreciate
tell you,
that.
I'd pay for the sex tape. Take my credit card info right now. Katy Perry and Justin Trudeau. Who's the top?
Tamara letting us know she's a former conservative. Says Pierre Polyev has no ability to deal with real-world issues. He has an opportunity. I will say this. Pierre Polyev has every opportunity to communicate to Canadians what he would be doing or what he thinks the smart policy is, or put it in front of Canadians. Not that the carbon tax doesn't affect some people, maybe more strongly than others. Not to suggest that it's not still a top issue for some voters. Not to suggest that it hasn't resonated with Pierre Poilievre's base in past, but on a day where everybody's talking about Carney and Davos, you may say, the armchair political strategist, well, obviously, Pierre's trying to distract from that. Pierre's trying to get people refocused on what's happening here at home. Pierre's trying to whatever. It's like, read the room. Effective leaders and leaders that win elections understand how to read rooms and how to pivot and when to, deliver something that the population is actually looking for, is actually craving to hear more about.
Pivot.
Tommy Temper says Pierre Poilievre does not have to say anything. Carney is on a downward spiral. Ooh. That's one way to describe what's going on over the past 24 hours, Tommy.
I don't know. There's a lot of W's.
Vamp says, so are we ignoring the fact that the Liberal government is reimposing consumer fuel taxes in new regulations, or is it just like tell any lie to try to take Pierre down a bit? I'm not trying to take Pierre down at all. As a matter of fact, I didn't even say Pierre Poilievre in like the first 75 minutes of the show, I don't think. But listen, guys, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen, right? If you don't want to be criticized or if you don't want to be evaluated or analyzed or discussed, then don't step into those leadership roles. Pierre Poilievre right now is at a point where he has to convince Canadians that he can do a better job here at home and on the world stage than Mark Carney. Now, critics of Mark Carney will point out that, he hasn't done shit on getting a deal done with the United States, on getting CUSMA renegotiated. Carney has clapped back, including on this show, in an exclusive, saying that he's not going to sign a bad deal. And that it may not be in Canada's best interest to sign a deal immediately if it doesn't serve where Canada's looking to go. There's plenty of criticism that you can level at the Carney government. You heard it here after the federal budget on back-to-back Real Talk roundtables. We had a couple of episodes, one in particular with back-to-back roundtables. We heard from Kaylin Anderson, who's the CEO of Build Edmonton Metro. This is just one that comes to mind, where she came on the show and said home builders absolutely hate the Carney budget and took aim at that. There's things that you can criticize Mark Carney on, but at the end of the day, Pierre Poilievre's MO needs to be convincing Canadians that he can do a better job, a more effective job at dealing with Donald Trump, at negotiating with the United States, at ensuring Canada's Arctic sovereignty, at building, exploring and establishing new trading partners, creating or eliminating interprovincial trade barriers, bringing the provinces together. Scott Moe, it's fascinating. Scott Moe yesterday, I don't have the clip with me, but Scott Moe made a statement on now, of course, he was part of that delegation to China, right? And let me find it. Johnny, can you give me 10 seconds and reiterate the value of YouTube channel memberships, or pick something that you want to talk about for 10 seconds? Because I want to find this Scott Moe clip. I'm going to track it down. This is remarkable. And I'm going to ask Real Talkers to compare and contrast the perspectives of two conservative premiers side by side geographically in Alberta and Saskatchewan. That's coming up in just a quick second, Johnny.
This month and this month only, every Real Talk member who becomes an official YouTube member will receive 1 ounce of Ryan Jespersen's bathwater.
Stop!
Taken from his hot tub out back, which is now in repair.
Yes, it is. We're
selling off the bathwater to get it all fixed up, and you could tune in, chime in, and win by becoming a member. Go over to our YouTube homepage. Did we just start
selling my bathwater?
Hit join. Backwater? That'd be even worse.
Backwater.
Backwash.
We're going to cut this part out of the podcast. Don't worry. Check this out. So this is Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe, and this just jumped out at me because we're talking about national unity. He's just back from Beijing. Here's Saskatchewan's Premier.
I think the open conversations that we have at the premier level, the provincial level, and have with the Prime Minister are as strong as they've ever been. It doesn't mean we agree on everything, but certainly the challenges that we're facing today are not coming from Ottawa in our perspective. They are coming from other countries around the world. And we need to work together, not in full agreement all the time, but work together to defend our Canadian economy and our Canadian way of life. And that's, I think, in fairness, what the approach that I took when I had the opportunity to sit in Beijing with the Prime Minister and to some degree not only represent Saskatchewan but represent Canadians in what I believe to be a good deal for our nation.
That's Premier Scott Moe, right? Doesn't agree with everything, says, right? But we need to work together to defend our Canadian economy and our Canadian way of life, working with the federal government. That's remarkable. Many of you would also suggest, well, yeah, obviously, that's what we should be doing. Makes perfect sense. It does, right? But one province over in our home province of Alberta, you're not hearing that at all. I'm not expecting Danielle Smith to kiss Mark Carney's ring. I'm not expecting Danielle Smith to stop sticking up for Alberta or defending Alberta's best interest. That's her job as premier. But to get back to what Pierre Poilievre's MO needs to be, or how Pierre Poilievre, like what's his roadmap to becoming prime minister, it's got to be inspiring NDP, Liberal, Conservative, provincial leaders, premiers, those across the aisle federally, when appropriate and reasonable and possible, to get on the same page, to work together for Canadians' best interest. That's what Canadians are looking for right now. This isn't politics as usual. Talk shows are pivoting. Political strategists are pivoting. Everyday citizens are pivoting. The landscape has dramatically changed. And so needs to be our strategy. So needs to be our perspective, one that reflects a changing landscape, a recentering, if you will, a refocusing of our priorities, of our strengths, of our vulnerabilities, and how to address it. Let us know what you think about all this to talk at ryanjespersen.com. As we wrap this episode, again, welcome to all of our brand new YouTube channel members. We appreciate you. Thanks to everybody that's contributing to the live chat. The majority of you are going to hear or see this show later, and we welcome your feedback, either as a YouTube comment. You can leave a comment on Spotify. Make sure you follow us on all the socials at Real Talk RJ. Want to let you know we got big shows coming up tomorrow. Past president of the Alberta Medical Association, Dr. Paul Parks, will join us. We'll get into updated polling on Friday. Next Tuesday, one of Jason Kenney's former senior staffers on why recall legislation was a big mess to begin with.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen. Executive producer Josh Dunford. Technical producer John Hicks. General manager Katie Cook-Chivers. Account coordinator Lawrence Derlego. Human resources Lena Shepard. Website design Mike Johnston. Voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Member Emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.